Right. Even with the expansion of European trade and European exploration, trade remained extremely important to these Muslim gunpowder empires as well. Now, when we look at agriculture, agriculture remained the basis of all three of these empires. But unlike China and Europe and some other regions we've looked at, they didn't really benefit much from new crops from the Americas. In fact, they kind of turned away from them. And they used a little bit of corn and things like that to feed their animals, but they just didn't see the benefits of the American crops that other parts of the world did. They did, though, become very interested in coffee and tobacco. Coffee houses are going to spread, and it's going to cause many Islamic moralists to protest the widespread use of coffee and tobacco. Peasants, especially as these empires continued, tended to be overtaxed and overworked. And that's going to lead to problems in the later part of the empire as some peasants simply began to abandon their fields because they were so overtaxed and overworked. All three of these empires were very diverse and multinational, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious. And because of that, toleration was extremely important in all three of these empires. Rulers had to practice toleration in order to appease the diverse population underneath them. And then trade. Trade remained extremely important, as it has always been. Because of their location at the crossroads of Afro-Eurasia, trade remained important to all three of these empires. But over time, they're going to begin to allow outsiders to control a lot of the trade. Jews, Christians, and other Europeans are going to come to dominate trade. And maritime trade is going to become more important than the land-based trade. And so this is going to kind of circumvent that monopoly that the Muslim world had had on Afro-Eurasian trade for centuries. And as we talked about the Mughal Empire, they're actually going to come to ignore a lot of the long-distance trade and focus more internally, but allow outsiders to control a lot of their foreign trade. And so it's one of the things that's going to lead to kind of a decline of all three of these empires. Look at religious affairs. As I said earlier, they were very diverse, and this created challenges for all three of these empires. The Ottoman Empire had many Jewish and Christian populations underneath them, and so they had to practice religious toleration. In India, most of their population was Hindu, and so they had to practice religious toleration as well. And that led to challenges. We already talked about Akbar and his attempt to create a syncretic faith. That's a good example of this toleration, as he tried to create his Din-e-Ilahi to appeal to both the Muslims and the Hindus in India. And again, even though ultimately it didn't work, it does show that tolerance. Another religion that was taking root in India is Sikhism. Sikhism was a faith that started in northwestern India that initially combined aspects of both Islam and Hinduism. And it believed in the equality of all of its followers. A lot of soldiers and merchants become attracted to Sikhism. But as they progress, they also become more and more anti-Muslim, partially because Muslims begin to kind of persecute them, especially in the later part of the Mughal Empire. And so then they kind of begin to resist the Muslim forces. Look at the culture. Again, because they ruled such a diverse population, the culture represented that as well. And in a lot of ways, in all three of these empires, this is kind of a golden age of Islamic art and architecture. Istanbul, the Ottoman capital, was filled with mosques, the famous Mosque of Suleiman, and they convert the old Hagia Sophia from a church into a mosque. And again, you had public gardens and mansions that beautified the new capital. In the Safavid Empire, Isfahan was built as a new capital, and it too was beautified by mosque. And then probably the best example of this golden age of art and architecture is the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal was built in the Mughal Empire. It was built by Shah Jahan as a tomb for his dead wife. But it is a great example of the combined Persian and Hindu architectural features. You see aspects of Islamic architecture with the use of domes and arches that actually came from Persia and before that from Rome. And then you also see the very ornate ornament of the Hindu architecture displayed as well.